Hey there, welcome back to the Cruise Elite Podcast. What's up, Tony? How are you?
Good morning, Taylor.
What's new?
I signed up for a 5K, which...
No kidding.
Yeah, which is new for me. I played soccer growing up, so I guess like I have run a lot, but never as a sport and never really for training, at least for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Like I'll like jog around the neighborhood for a week or two and then just stop.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Any words of advice?
Get your joint mobility going. You know, just before and after kind of thing, couple minutes before and after. It's super helpful when you're starting to, get into running and just dealing with the new stress, if you will, that's going to be on your body with starting to get back into running. It's just really amazing maintenance for your joints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have some angry joints, some creaky joints.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes when I'm running, it's like it feels worse at first, but then by the time the run's over, I actually feel better. In terms of just like creakiness. Nothing crazy, but I think that's kind of cool and interesting.
Yeah, so historically, the drills that seem to be super useful for runners are ankle tilt series. We've got something called a toe pull series, which is a mobility set of drills for like some of the joints in the midfoot. And then stuff like knee circles, which I'm sure you've seen because you've tried those ones out a bunch.
I do knee circles. Yep.
Yeah. So I'll have to shoot you over some of those because we have at least demonstrations of them on our YouTube page.
Yeah.
But those are really key drills for running.
And on the YouTube, let's say if there's other runners out there listening and they wanted to find them, are they like, should they look up toe pulls and ankle?
Yeah, they could. Yeah,
Okay.
they could. And the thing with our YouTube channel, so we have so many exercises that we teach people. It's ridiculous. Like I couldn't possibly have tutorials for all of them on YouTube. So what you end up seeing on YouTube with a lot of the drills are just demonstrations, but no instructions. And that works fine for some people. That's because we use those demonstration videos inside one of our apps that we use that houses people's mobility routines.
Oh, cool.
So if you come across drills on the YouTube channel that don't have instruction, that's why.
Right.
But at least you get a good visual and you can figure out a lot just from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like listeners of this podcast in particular, they're probably nerding out a little bit and picking up notes and
Exactly.
So very cool. Very cool.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I've got about 2 months to get into shape, so we'll see. Like my goal is just to not embarrass myself.
Yep. Man, I am not a runner myself. Running for me, I think I don't know. It's like a punishment. And that's because I was brought up around running being a punishment. So
like go do a lap. Like
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or like as a wrestler, like, okay, go, get your runs in with your sweatsuit on so you can lose a few pounds so you can make weight, that kind of junk. Yeah. So running for me never really became something I enjoyed that much, but I got to say, I like trail running. If I had to run, I would run on trails.
Yeah. I think part of it's more interesting. The few times I've had the luxury of trail running, I really enjoyed it because it's like you're really careful about where you're placing your feet. Like it's like way more present than if you're just on a treadmill.
It's a good way to put it.
Like, man, am I done yet? Like counting the seconds as opposed to like you got to maneuver obstacles. There's someone walking their dog. Like, yeah,
that's a good way to put it. For me, like any kind of cardiovascular exercise, I almost need to trick myself into doing it. It's just for me, it's just been the form of fitness that I don't look forward to.
Yeah.
The other day I was riding our stationary bike, I set it up in front of the window and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so lame. I'm like inside pedaling a stationary bike, looking at the mountains. At least I have a nice view, but like I should probably be outside doing something.
Yeah. Although the winter comes and then
I know
and then you'll be grateful for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's
view.
A tool. Yeah. In the winter, there's no question.
Does Alicia do any like competitive running ever? Like, does she ever do
not
races?
Competitive? She has. She has done some. I think she's done a 5K if I remember correctly. She's done some running. much more like that type of stuff is more enjoyable to her than it is for me. But she also likes running on trails and hiking and stuff. But yeah, it's always been a thing for me. I've never been the endurance athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. Hopefully my knee cooperates. And, speaking of creaky joints and, little annoying pains and that kind of thing, today we're going to be talking about pain and trying to better understand pain. I think one of the themes that has come up many times is that on this podcast is that pain exists in the mind. Pain does not necessarily correlate with physical trauma or dysfunction. And so I wanted to kind of unwrap that a little more, because it's easy for me to nod along intellectually and say, yeah, that's true. But as soon as my elbow hurts, I'm thinking about what's wrong with my elbow.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the normal
It
reaction that most of us have who aren't studied applied neurologists like yourself.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to hand it over to you and, walk us through pain and how it works.
Sure. It's weird. Pain is probably the weirdest thing that we could talk about. I think going back to what you said about pain being in the mind, so I would use different words, I guess, than the mind. I would say brain, because if I were to say mind, I think people might get this idea that pain could be imagined. And we're not really talking about imagining pain, because a person's pain experience is real, right? And so people get confused right here. And this is something that's actually being discussed a lot in the fitness space, in the rehab space. People are starting to argue about it a lot too, which is, true to form for, the fitness industry. And,
get anybody online and they start arguing.
Yeah. And so I generally like to say pain is a construct of the brain, and it doesn't live in the body. It actually lives in the brain. And we can talk about why. It's a confusing thing to wrap your head around at first because of what you just said. If your elbow hurts, it's human nature to it's human nature to think that there's some sort of damage that has happened to the elbow, but that's not always the case. I don't want to confuse people and make people think that there is no such thing as tissue damage in the body, because tissue damage is a real thing, and tissue damage can absolutely correlate to a pain experience, and it often does. But what we also know is that you can be experiencing pain and have no tissue damage whatsoever, which is really weird. And with the type of work that I do, most people are coming to me for problem solving aches and pains. And the thing that's so interesting for me is that most of the pain that I help people resolve and improve is non-injury event pain. So people are not really coming to me saying, I hurt my ankle last week. Can you help me with my ankle? If that's the case, they're generally going a physical therapy route. They have an acute injury. They're having a physical therapist support them through the acute injury phase, which is a good thing. If you've had especially some kind of tissue trauma because of an injury event. Most of the time, if you're a health and movement professional and you're a personal trainer, some kind of movement coach, your clients have pain. Most of them have pain. Probably all of them, at least close to all of them, have some kind of pain thing going on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have damage in their body that's associated with it. This is really strange to discuss and to think about, because when you're the person in pain, it's like you're positive something's wrong.
Yeah.
You're positive. And I think back to my own history as an athlete and having chronic elbow pain. I was sure I had damage in my elbows.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I didn't find that out until many years later, when a single exercise then helped me through that. But the whole time, it was more of what we would call chronic pain. The definition of chronic pain seems to fluctuate and change, but basically, last time I checked, it was any pain that you are experiencing that I think has existed for more than like 3 months or after tissue damage has been healed.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of people that still have chronic pain even after an injury has healed, right? Which is also strange to think about.
Mm-hmm.
You can have pain from an old injury, even though there's no more mechanical problem or tissue trauma necessarily. You could still have pain because of that injury event. So pain is this weird thing. It's more of a construct of the brain that comes down to a lot of different factors, and it's not only associated with tissue trauma. Okay, so injury doesn't equal pain necessarily, and pain doesn't equal an injury.
Yeah, no, that's important to hear. And I do appreciate you making the distinction between, pain is in the mind versus a construct of the brain. Because, yeah, the other thing I think of, when someone says pain is in the mind is that you can just will it away.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, if it's in my brain, my mind, like
Yeah.
I can just change my mind, right? And
Right.
that's not exactly what we're
It's not
doing
exactly
with applied neurology,
It's
right?
not exactly what we're doing, but what you are saying is not necessarily untrue.
Right.
Which is bizarre. I mean, I have willed pain away before. I think a lot of people have. It's really odd,
but not like closing your eyes and thinking pain go away. You're
yes,
doing it through applied neurology.
Well, I'm doing it. So yes, you're absolutely dealing with pain through applied neurology, but I'm talking about even dealing with pain without doing anything special for it. Doing that with mindset.
Okay, talk to me about that.
I kind of had this experience recently when I went to Maine. So I was fly fishing with a buddy for 5 days, and I'm still dealing with some unusual inflammatory feeling pain on my left hamstring. It's been this like fluctuating thing all summer long.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of flared up before that trip. And I was like, man, this is bad timing. But I took care of myself on that trip. I got good sleep. I continued to take supplements. I had good nutrition. It's like, okay, at the very least, I'm going to pretend, I'm an athlete here, right? These are the fishing Olympics. Which is typically how I like to go fishing. I'm going to take care of myself in all these other ways. And then just being in a new place and being excited and being with a good friend and just being fired up about the experience, I was able to do the things I wanted to do, which consisted of a lot of hiking through the woods and stuff. And I was worried that maybe that would get the best of me. And it didn't. I was fine because of my mindset, because of my excitement. That to me is a real thing, right? And I think athletes do that all the time. You see athletes who actually have an injury and they're able to go out and perform at the highest level. There's something about mindset and being able to adjust in however we might do that with our mindset to then be able to still perform even though pain exists.
So this is an interesting topic, and I just experienced this when I was saying, I'm running and I have like knee pain, and then by the time the run's over, it's gone. It's like I'm not even thinking about it on the walk home. I'm like, oh yeah, my knee pain's gone. Like, interesting. What do you think is happening there?
So it's hard to say for sure, but a lot of times when we have an ache or a pain in the body, good exercise does solve it, at least for a certain amount of time. And when that happens, it's usually just the sheer activation that helped you deal with that. Recently in our courses, we were talking about taking health histories. And one of the questions that I ask everybody is, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel good? And then as the day goes on, do you feel worse? Or do you generally feel lousy waking up and then as the day goes on, you start to feel better? And I ask these questions to people because they tell me different things. They tell me whether or not you have maybe more of a neurologic issue, or they tell me maybe if you have more of a metabolism based issue where your metabolism is essentially crashing by later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then your pain increases, or you might have some kind of higher order issue that fatigues out, like maybe your visual system.
Mm-hmm.
And when you reach those thresholds, pain usually goes up back to the threat bucket, right? So similar, kind of what you were just talking about, where when you have some pain and then a movement makes it better, oftentimes it's just an activation thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were my client and you told me that during a history, in my mind, I would go, oh, this guy sounds like he just needs more of the right activation at the right dose in order to keep that ball rolling
Mm-hmm.
so we can get control over the pain. So that's, movement by design is capable of inhibiting pain, right? And that's how we use it with neurology. We just do it very specifically and aim it at certain issues.
So you made a distinction between like the acute injury phase and more like a chronic pain phase, assuming there was injury in the first place.
Right.
One of the protocols that I remember for pain like that some strength and conditioning coaches were really advocating for injury was like actually do a lot of really light reps.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say squats are hurting your knee, like do a bunch of light squats, like a
Yeah.
lot of them.
Yep.
And one of the reasonings that I remember hearing for this was getting oxygen to the wound, getting blood to the area, and that'll help it heal.
Yep.
In the chronic phase, that same movement, like if there's no trauma to heal and that same type of movement is helping, what mechanism is occurring there?
So let me make sure I understand. So if it's not a chronic pain and then you're using the reps.
Yeah, sorry, this was kind of it made sense in my mind. But basically the acute phase, like I can understand, like there's a mechanical thing happening where
Right.
you are trying to force blood into the region,
Mm-hmm.
and that's doing good things for healing it. In a chronic phase, is that mechanism still part of why you say like good activating movement is helpful, or is it something else?
Yeah, so that is still a useful tool in a chronic state.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it might be one of the best tools for kind of interfering with a chronic pain cycle. We talk a lot about doing things that promote circulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always a localized thing. Like if your elbow hurts, we could do 50 bicep curls with light weight
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps increase local, blood flow to the area. We could do isometrics and, with the same kind of intent. But we also talk about this in a non-localized way, and I actually think it's more effective. And that's where we talk about nasal breathing with cardiovascular exercise or some kind of CO2 tolerance training to improve perfusion everywhere, blood flow everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of can do that in more of a localized way. I actually really like blood flow restricted training.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a very useful chronic pain tool. Very useful.
Like
It
those
is.
bands that,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. You put the cuffs on your arms or your legs, and you essentially do kind of a high intensity, low weight repetitions. It could be body weight, it could be lightweight, whatever exercise you're doing. Could be simple as bicep curls, could be as simple as calf raises. And it's an amazing tool for a lot of different reasons. It goes deep. There's a lot of science that goes into it, and there's a lot of research that has come out about it. But generally speaking, it's a really useful tool for improving overall circulation. There's very global effects of it throughout the body. So that is, when you say improve circulation, I think more towards those tools, the CO2 tolerance work, the nasal breathing, cardiovascular exercise, and blood flow restricted training, before I think about, okay, hold this 5-pound weight and do 50 reps with it. Just because those other tools I mentioned, for me anyway, have been more effective. But yes, circling back to your original question, it is also a very useful tool for a state of chronic pain, not just acute injury type stuff.
Mm-hmm. So increased circulation, increased blood flow, it does good things.
It does. Oh, and let me add, because you use the word activation too. When I say activation, I am primarily thinking about brain activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily talking about even movement of the body. In the fitness industry, people say activation. I never thought about this until right now.
Okay.
In the fitness industry, people say activation, right? And we might say like activate muscles, activate the glutes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's always the glutes for some reason.
I don't use activation in relation to muscles. I just don't think that way. Like the fitness industry says, okay, activate your glutes because they're turned off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think that way. Your glutes don't turn off,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't. Why do we have to turn them on? So I don't use that language, but this is an important distinction to make. When I say activation, I'm thinking primarily neurologically and with brain structures. So, like you, as the guy who's out for a run and realizing that the more you run, the less pain you feel. From an activation standpoint, I'm not really talking about your quads and your hamstrings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about your cerebellum, your cortex, your brainstem, right? All of that activation through movement seems like it's helping you to inhibit some of that pain.
Yeah. And to peel this apart even further, it sounds like there's a couple things going on at the same time. Because like circulation, blood oxygen, whatever's going on there, that sounds like fuel to me.
Yes.
That sounds like we are properly fueling, the body to do the work that it needs to do. And so maybe if you're sedentary or something, you're not, actually getting oxygen to the places that need it, and that's maybe a cause for pain, right?
Probably that right there is probably one of the highest causes for chronic pain.
Yeah.
Is a fuel capacity issue.
Yeah.
Even if you're a well-trained individual, you can still
Mm-hmm.
have a fuel capacity issue, some sort of energy uptake issue. Yeah, whatever it might be. It just could be not giving your body the right nutrition. It could be your body not knowing what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then simultaneously, there's this neurological connection, right? This activation that you just talked about, where it's like, okay, when I move this joint or load this joint, it's firing these nerves that are going to these parts of my brain,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm clarifying this pathway. I'm clarifying this map that needed it. It wasn't getting the stimulus. The brain area wasn't getting the stimulus that it was supposed to from that region of the body.
Absolutely, yes.
So those are the two sort of mechanisms that I see at work in this example. Do you have anything you want to add to that or explain about those two things?
Well, clarifying the map is a big one. It's a really simple way for us to understand something that's too complex to understand. Because, like you said before, there's so much going on at one time. Pain processing too in the brain is outrageous. There's so many involved parts. But clarifying the map is a real thing, and that is a really good way to describe your example of going for a run and feeling better as you go. When you think back like to the neural hierarchy, visual system, vestibular system, proprioceptive system, you're getting a lot of stimulus that you weren't getting before. And like you were saying, that is going to upregulate those systems and clarify those maps.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like when you take histories and talk to people and they're telling you they get better from movement, that's, in my mind, that is the best possible scenario. That's the best one, because that just means you need the right activation and the right map clarity. And those things are pretty achievable pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The reverse is harder. The more I move, the worse I feel.
Right.
That's
then
much
you can't
harder.
even do the stuff that might be helping. You have to find really weird ways to help first.
That's when it can get very weird. Those are your fuel capacity issues, your inflammatory type conditions that have been around for a long time where, gosh, you might do the right exercises, but 25 or 24 hours later, now you're getting a negative result from something. That makes it really hard. So the first example is the easy one, right? We just need to get more of the right activation. The second one is, man, now we got to get creative and find an entry point that your body doesn't reject. That's why so many people end up in the pain vortex, because they try something and it doesn't work. It makes them worse, or, they get a result, but then later on it hurts, right? And then they're in this vortex. And as soon as you enter, a traditional healthcare system inside the pain vortex, you're about to go down a disappointing rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah. It might be worthwhile, especially with regard to inflammation, like you said, to talk about the threat bucket.
Yeah.
And just give a quick primer. I know we've covered this several times, so you can keep it concise, right? But
yeah,
I think it's worth talking about that as another, like, kind of like clarifying the map as another just like universal sort of tool that you can use to like help understand complex issues, right?
It's huge, because that's the key word. Yes, that's the key word, is understand. So if you were to ask me what my highest percentage tool was for helping somebody get out of chronic pain, I would say making sure they understand what pain is and where it comes from. Because almost nobody knows that. And that makes pain very scary. It's so easy to jump to conclusions, like when we started talking about, hey, if there's pain in my elbow, there must be damage, but not necessarily. So understanding pain and having pain education is really the most valuable tool for helping anybody get through and eventually resolve their pain. And so for us as coaches, that does start with the threat bucket education. So threat bucket, very simple. You have a bucket. It represents you and your nervous system. And all day long, you're encountering different stressors throughout your day, whatever they might be. And they're entering the bucket. And as they enter the bucket and you're dealing with them, the level of threat, as we call it, perceived threat, is building in the bucket. And so we need to have ways to dismantle that. We might do that through self-care strategies, exercise, good lifestyle habits, but we might also be encountering excess threat if we have different issues, vision issues, balance issues, nutritional issues, some kind of fuel capacity issues. And of course, all these other things that we generally don't talk enough about with fitness, like relationship issues, financial stress, all these life stresses also fit into this bucket and add to that overall level of threat. Well, when the bucket fills up too high and reaches threshold, it spills over. And that spillover is what we call the output. That output most commonly is in the form of increased pain and decreased performance. So we're thinking very holistically right now with this threat bucket,
right?
Which means that I might be a well-trained person and I might be healthy, but maybe because of my training stress and my stress at work, my threat bucket is up to the brim. And then I have some financial stress and poor sleep that tips over my bucket.
Yeah.
Right. And now, as a result of tipping over my bucket and having that output, all of a sudden my right knee hurts, and it hasn't hurt in 15 years since I sprained my MCL. And that's the person that wakes up on a Saturday morning and goes, what the heck? Why do I have this mysterious knee pain? Let me trace my steps and make sure I didn't do anything to hurt myself. And they're like, well, I mean, I did run on Thursday. I ran on Thursday. I must have hurt myself. Like I must have hurt my knee on Thursday.
Right.
Because that's what I did last that was physical. And so when your knee hurts, you think you've damaged it. You retrace your steps. You convince yourself it was last Thursday's run, but you never brought into the equation the relationship stress, the financial stress, the overall training stress, the poor sleep, right? So all of these things combined really impact our threat bucket. So we're constantly talking about the threat bucket because what you learn from this is how holistic your health and performance really is. And it really causes people to stop and better evaluate their life as a whole, rather than just, hey, my knee hurts, so I must have done something to my knee physically. All right, because when the threat goes up and it reaches threshold, your brain pain as a signal right, is probably the best way your brain, it's the best strategy your brain has for behavior modification.
Yeah, it's telling you to stop.
It's telling you to stop, right? And most of us will not want to stop. And so the best way for your brain to get you to stop, because remember, pain is protective in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So every pain output that we experience chronically, the mysterious types of pain, it is to protect you. And knowing that allows you to ask some more sophisticated questions about, why am I experiencing this pain? What is the protective reasoning for this pain? And it allows you to evaluate everything if you think about the threat bucket. So pain is protective, and it does not always correlate with the body part that hurts. And the intensity that you feel or experience that pain doesn't even necessarily correlate to the severity of a problem, which is also very bizarre to think about. So it's just, how much does your brain want to get your attention to hopefully change your behavior in some way?
Yeah, I feel like we've all seen, either in ourselves or in close friends and family, that person that can't catch a break.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've been struggling for whatever reason. Maybe it's job, maybe it's relationship, probably all of the above. And then like something else bad happens and you're like, oh man, like they really can't catch a break. And then they injure their leg, or they
Yes.
blow out their shoulder, or, and it's just like, oh man, it's like this black cloud is following this person around,
Yep.
and the injuries usually come during that time,
Yeah. That's a real thing. The injury happening when there's a lot of other stresses around.
Yeah.
That's a very real thing.
Yeah. It turns out like when you move and it's really stressful to move, you might hurt your back.
Yeah. And your performance is generally your performance is not as good, right? In those states. And that's probably a big reason why you're more at risk for injury.
Yeah. So knowing that kind of more holistic context, I mean, I'm going to say this kind of flippantly. I don't mean it like that, but it's definitely easier to think about fixing your knee than fixing your life, right?
Definitely.
But looking at those global factors that might be contributing, sounds like it's always a good place to start.
It is. And the thing is, if we have strategies to dismantle the threat in the bucket, remember, we can manipulate this equation a little bit by having good strategies to decrease perceived threat on our nervous system, even if we're not able to fully deal with some of the other bigger things like the financial stress and the relationship stress. We might be not able to deal with those immediately, but we can take on high payoff drills, as we call them, that will help you reduce threat. And I think that even though we might not be taking care of like the root threat, if you will, we can still manipulate that threat bucket equation, and because of that have increased performance and decreases in pain.
I did want to talk about types of pain and see if there's anything to be gleaned from that. I don't know that we've talked about it much, but you've had different pains, right? Some are sharp shooting pains, some are dull throbbing pains. There's sort of a spectrum in between. Some are super localized, some radiate, So I just kind of wanted to go through that. Are there any clues to be gleaned from the type of pain someone's feeling?
Yeah, there's some clues. And I'm going to talk, I'm going to describe the ones that I think are the most common, right?
Okay.
The different things I come across, but there's a lot to this, I think. So you can have joint pain or you can have muscle pain, right? If you think about your own kind of injury history, it's kind of interesting to think like, all right, have all my injuries and pains been more about joints or have they been more about muscles? Okay. Sometimes this tells you different things. I can tell you from experience that joint pain, at least in my experience, has been easier to work with immediately than a muscle pain. Okay. So, like, for example, knee pain, like, so localized to the knee joint versus pain in your quad muscle. Okay. There's a lot I could say about this, and I don't want to make it too I don't want to make this too wild, but at least experientially, what I've found is that a muscle pain is probably more related to, unless we're talking about just overtraining stress, whether you're overtraining or maybe you're a deconditioned person and then you went out and did something that you haven't done in a long time and now you have stressed your tissues.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely can have muscle pain from that. But I think still most of the time it ends up expressing itself as a joint pain.
Mm-hmm.
Muscle pains are a little bit more related to health problems.
Mm.
This is, I don't know how many people agree with me on this. This is purely my opinion, I think. I want to say that. So in my experience, muscle pains are more related to health issues, and joint pains are sometimes more mechanical in nature, but also, I don't know, just easier to work with. And there's different types of like pain sensations that can also give you clues. So for example, if you've ever had an injury or a pain that was more nerve related,
Mm-hmm.
it might give you kind of nervy like symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's like numbness or tingling.
Yeah, that like electricity
Yeah,
tingling
kind of like a
feeling.
radiating,
Uh-huh.
kind of a radiating discomfort or pain down a limb or something. If you've ever had like sciatica or anything similar to like sciatic symptoms, oftentimes it just kind of radiates. You can't necessarily point at a very specific location that you feel it, but it's more broad and kind of travels, and it's sharper, more electric, numb, tingly, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
With that type of pain, that immediately starts to make me think about receptors, peripheral nerves, and the spinal cord.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where I would be starting if somebody said, hey, I got history of sciatica. I've got this radiating down, pain down the leg. Those are the things I'm starting to think about, which just hearing that from somebody saves you a lot of time, right? You can start to really get on track with how to deal with that. So that's a very common one. Now, another less understood one is visceral pain. And some, depending on who you read, and it's interesting. A lot of times some of the experts will say that most of the pain that we experience is likely visceral pain. And what I mean by visceral pain is actually an internal organ that is referring to an area of the body. So there's lots of different referral-based maps and diagrams you can find if you look this up. The one that if our listeners want to look one up so they can get a visual on this, look up what is called the head zones. So HEAD, like the head zones.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe comma pain referral patterns. You could write doctor. I think it was named after Dr. Head. And what you'll get is a diagram of the body with some different colors on it, and different areas of the body have different colors and are associated with something going on internally. So for example, if you look at the diagram, it'll, like in yellow, you'll see that the lower back, the lateral hips, kind of all the way down kind of to mid thigh, and even the inside of the thigh, it's yellow and might be associated with the kidneys.
Interesting.
And the bladder will show up more around like the tailbone and the tops of the hamstrings. There's a lot of them, and there are some very specific areas for some of the other internal organs. And, there's one for the diaphragm on the upper trap region. The liver is on the right side. There's like kind of a very long oval along the side of the scapula on the right side of the body. Right, that one's more associated with the liver. So there's different relationships there. So when an organ is stressed or dealing with some kind of maybe chemical irritation, or there is a serious problem, it doesn't. But I want you to know, it doesn't have to be serious.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible to actually feel pain in these different body zones, these different head zones related to the organ, not necessarily a biomechanical problem or a joint issue or a muscle issue. It's just that the organ is referring there because of our neuroanatomy and sharing the same pain sensitive nerves at the same level of the spinal cord, there is a convergence of signaling that happens.
Wire together, fire together kind of thing.
Similar, yeah. And it's a convergence of signaling that is happening between muscle, skin, and nociception. And basically your brain ends up understanding what level of the spinal cord the threat might be happening at, but it's not necessarily able to make the distinction between muscle, skin, and organ. Mm-hmm. And so it's essentially confused, and that's very interesting to think about. The one that almost everybody is familiar with is actually what happens when somebody is expressing signs of possibly having a heart attack. You hear about, is it the left arm? I think it's the left arm. Mm-hmm. And people will complain or say that if someone is complaining of like shoulder and bicep pain and down into the arm and they have a heart condition, that's a red flag, right? That is an example of like viscerally referred pain, but this is for the heart. Doesn't mean you have a shoulder problem or a bicep problem. It means you're having viscerally referred pain.
Interesting. That's a really cool map for people to check out.
Definitely.
I'm curious, does like the front of the head and like the temples have a zone?
Well, so if you look this up, you can go down a massive rabbit hole because there's other people that have created their maps, and then if you keep following it, you're going to end up probably going into some of the information we could look at within acupuncture, right? Mm-hmm. In traditional Chinese medicine. And man, you can keep going with this thing because the body expresses these things in a lot of,
there's so many ways. Weird connections. And
the super practical ones are the head zones. And every health and movement professional should be familiar with them because a lot of times your clients are going to be pointing at body parts and they're going to be describing pain that is less localized and over more of a broad region and is more dull and achy, mm-hmm. but not necessarily exacerbated by movement. Mm-hmm. So if I have chronic right scapula issues, I swear there's a problem with my scapula. And, I go to see therapists about it and nobody can really get the tension to go away. I might get some temporary relief from massaging the area or getting some tissue work done, doing some mobility, but it keeps coming back. If I've got right scapular issues and it keeps coming back and it's dull and colicky and difficult to localize, and it's sort of just there. It's like a 2 out of 10 mm-hmm. all the time. Mm-hmm. Even when I'm working out, it doesn't really get worse by doing anything. It's just kind of there. That is more of a viscerally referred issue potentially. And so knowing that's very important because you can throw every, manual tool you want at a viscerally mediated issue. It's not necessarily going to solve it. Every movement you want, it's not necessarily going to solve it. However, I do think there is a way we can change our thinking about how we might work with a viscerally mediated pain. In the work that I do, that is usually when I turn to some of my insular training tools. And we have a whole podcast mm-hmm. on the insular cortex and interoception. A lot of those tools that target the insula and the vagus nerve can be super useful for starting to dismantle viscerally mediated pain.
So it is that visceral, man, I'm already forgetting the language you use. Viscerally
mediated. Yeah.
That viscerally mediated pain. Is that ever like a red flag, like referral for you?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you work with viscerally mediated pain and it seems to be pretty stubborn and basically what you're doing isn't working or it works very temporarily, but then symptoms seem to come back with a vengeance, that could potentially be a referral for somebody, especially if you are kind of doing the math based on history and you have some suspicion that they're dealing with some kind of internal health threat and that it's not maybe what they think it is. I mean,
right. It's not your lower back. It's your kidney.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it doesn't, I want to be clear, like the intensity of the pain felt doesn't necessarily correlate to the severity of the problem. And viscerally mediated pain is extremely common, which I think would surprise people
Yeah.
because it sounds like, well, if something hurts inside me and it's an internal organ, if I have some kind of issue there, it must be very, very serious. It's not always very, very serious. It's weird how pain works. It could be some kind of just poor signaling, map issue, whatever the case might be. And oftentimes we can deal with the visceral types of pain pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can't, I think that's when you might think a little bit further and potentially make a referral.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that you come back to when you're trying interventions that you think might be helpful and nothing's really sticking, a lot of times you go to fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Is fuel ever related to this type of pain specifically, or
Yeah, it can
are
be.
they different? Okay.
Yeah, it absolutely can be. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're...
It's one more stone to unturn, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. So you definitely need to consider it. You'll usually be able to tell your client has a fuel capacity issue if they're having just a lot of dysregulated responses to your drills.
Mm-hmm.
It's the healthy response to movement is to improve. And when somebody doesn't improve and things become dysregulated, like, okay, they're a little better, now they're worse. They're a little better, now they're worse again. That kind of changing pattern in your assessments starts to tell you, okay, there might be a little bit of, internal chaos going on here, if you will, that we've got to figure out. And some of that just comes back to not having a super healthy metabolism. And so often you got to deal with that. And then that can also be useful for dealing with some of these visceral issues too.
I do want to talk about actual physical trauma, like broken bones, from broken bones to bruises and scrapes, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is an obvious, diagnosable, something bad happened
Sure.
to the body. You're not in the business of mending broken bones, right? And bruises tend to resolve themselves. But I think the interesting part of this conversation is what happens after.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a lot about scar tissue from surgery or from injury. I don't know that we're talking about broken bones so much,
Mm-hmm.
but I just wanted to open up that topic and say, okay, let's say you have had some real trauma to the body.
Mm-hmm.
What are you typically seeing once that acute phase is over?
So once the acute phase is over, one of the dead giveaways of that is that your drilling, if you're practicing any exercises, actually is starting to consistently help you feel better and you're getting immediate positive changes. Because inside that acute phase, if you're doing any localized work where you've had an injury, sometimes results can be very all over the place and you can get a lot of poor assessments.
Mm-hmm.
The acute phase is difficult to work with. I typically, with neuro tools anyway, I typically stay away from if it's a relatively serious injury that's causing a lot of pain symptoms, I typically will stay away from that as much as I can
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit to kind of respect that acute stage, but I will try to move other parts of the body. And there's strategies we can put in place too to help deal with pain and injury that's more acute. One of the interesting ones is working the opposite side of the body actually has a quite profound effect on the affected side. And this is something people, can even find good literature on. But it's one of the neuro tools we use all the time. Someone has right shoulder pain, let's work the left side of the body. And through different neural pathways, we can actually get some pain inhibition on the affected side by working the opposite side. Kind of the quick explanation for that is when we move let's say the left side of the body and we activate the left cerebellum, which then is speaking to the right cortex, and the right cortex sends signals down into the right side of your brainstem, what you end up doing is activating what's called anti-nociceptive pathways on that right side. And so basically what that means is the brainstem has the ability to kind of squash some of that nociception, which, by the way, if our listeners aren't familiar with this terminology, I maybe should have said this at the beginning of the episode. But I say nociception. What I mean by that is threat signaling. There is no such thing We know this now. There is no such thing as pain pathways in the body. So if I'm hammering a nail and I slip and hit my index finger with the hammer,
ow,
the pain that I experience does not start at the tip of my finger and then travel a pain pathway all the way to my brain, where now it's telling my brain that pain has occurred. It doesn't work like that. That's how we thought it worked. That's, I believe, like called maybe the Cartesian model of pain. It's the old one that's now outdated. That they actually still teach this. Not everybody's up to speed on this yet.
Oh no. Yeah.
But the simple example here is when you slip and hit your finger with a hammer, what has happened is threat receptors have become active. So those are nerve endings that live in that finger that are sensing signals more associated with possible danger. And so then that makes its way to the brain, and through a wild, processing, event that involves all areas of the brain, your brain is making decisions about whether or not what you are feeling is important enough to let through to other areas of the brain. So nociception is a key word here. Nociceptors are threat receptors. So we need to start kind of looking at pain a little bit differently, and understanding what a nociceptor is versus saying like a pain receptor, if you will, or a pain pathway.
Yeah. And just to kind of tie it back to what we were talking about with viscerally activated pain, is it that those internal organs don't have their own nociceptors, so they have to refer to other parts of the body that do?
Yes. So there's a lot to this. So you'd have to look up the different organs, because we have what's called solid organs and hollow organs. And depending on which organ we're talking about, some of these organs have the ability to express this nociception in a way that we can feel it.
Like a stomach ache.
Yes. And so this would be, unfortunately, what's happening when someone has an organ issue that goes undetected for a very long period of time and then becomes something very life-threatening, because you don't always get those symptoms. So that'd be one thing for our listeners to kind of look into, just to understand, the organs that can express the threat better than others, if you will. I think all this is really just kind of one big design based on survival. But yeah, not every organ, like, for example, the liver is you're going to see, I know people listening that work with a lot of people and help them with different mobility issues and stuff. How many right scapula issues have you seen in your career? It's ridiculous, right? It's just a very common referral, for a liver that might not have a life-threatening problem. It just might be struggling a little bit. So it's an interesting topic.
Let me know if this is outside of the scope of what you want to discuss on this, but like pain disorders, like chronic pain disorders, where it's not just like someone has, a cranky knee. It's something more than that, possibly diagnosable. Do you see, is there a place for applied neurology in those cases? And like, if so, like what do you know about that? What are people doing in that realm?
So applied neuro is a good tool for that kind of a pain disorder. They're very mysterious. They're very global. A lot of times when people have some kind of pain disorder, it's throughout their entire body, right? I have a lot of people message me about stuff like this because they're wondering the same thing. Can applied neuro help with something like this? The answer is yes, for sure. But I think it's very important to not get distracted by where you feel the pain and think a little bit more globally and holistically. So for me, I think first there are some challenges because people can become very exercise intolerant when they have some kind of global chronic pain. Sometimes we call it central windup of the nervous system. Basically, you're in a sympathetic state, a very strong sympathetic state, and your brain is expressing, chronic pain everywhere, basically. That can be very challenging because sometimes there's exercise intolerance that goes with this. So we have to find ways to get people to move at the right dose while respecting where they are and not exacerbating any issues. That's hard.
Their threat bucket, it sounds like their threat bucket's kind of maxed out.
Yep.
All the time.
It's maxed out, and oftentimes the person's nervous system will start interpreting normal signaling as dangerous signaling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things get really challenging. Finding the right entry point and the right thing, manipulating, exercise environment and drills to try to, make the nervous system happy enough to accept exercise. So in that scenario, neuro is very powerful because that's what neuro is.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of manipulating, the situation through drills and trying to, target specific areas based on what we know. I will say that in that case, probably the most important thing is going to be fuel and possibly lymphatics. We've talked a little bit about lymphatics in other episodes, and that's probably a starting point. And that could look like a number of different things. That could look like, again, CO2 tolerance training, light cardiovascular exercise, breathing through your nose, that type of thing. Some very, standalone breathing exercises, because fuel capacity is very important. Nutrition is huge as well. Literally, just learning how to manage your blood sugar and keep everything happy that way can go a long way in managing pain levels. And with the lymphatic system, when we're in a sympathetic state for an extended amount of time, it's very constricting on our lymphatics, and it creates, for lack of a better term, like stagnation in those fluids, and that can really trigger a lot of nociception. So sometimes we have a lymphatic system that's just not processing waste efficiently, and that can literally be the global pain. And so working with somebody that knows about lymphatics could be really huge there. There's a lot of different lymphatic techniques. We can do some of those things ourselves, whether it's, again, cardiovascular exercise, breathing, movement. There's different things we can do manually on our own body as well that can help promote better lymphatic waste removal.
Yeah, when I was getting over being sick and getting back into working out, I think I mentioned it's like, got to get back on the horse. You were like, check out these lymphatic drills. And basically it reminds me a little bit of your like your nerve tensioning or detensioning kind of stuff, where it's like you're gonna move through a sequence to kind of help those lymphs process what's in there. And yeah, it was cool. It was really cool.
So one of the more effective like self lymph drainage techniques that I use, and actually I was using it not long ago on myself. Man, it's so silly, but it can be so effective. Just lay down on the ground. I put my feet up on the bench I have in my gym, and I take it's about a 26-pound kettlebell. It doesn't have to be 26 pounds. It depends on the person and kind of what you can tolerate. There should not be any pain, but about 26 pounds is good for me. And I place it, in this case, I placed it on my left pec, basically. So right at the overlapping area of what is your anterior deltoid, your pec muscle, but also where your clavicle kind of runs across. That area. We wouldn't put the weight right on your clavicle because that would hurt, but just below it, if I set that kettlebell on my chest there and I turn the kettlebell on its side, I can usually turn the kettlebell just enough to kind of get it to grip in on my chest and kind of find a home where it's balancing. I often have a pillow underneath my shoulder to kind of act as like a little bit of give me a little bit of a blocking motion so the kettlebell doesn't just roll off my shoulder. And once that weight is there, I can kind of just breathe and relax. I might do some breathing drills. I might even do some mobility drills if I have a certain body part that's bothering me. That weight on that thoracic duct is very, very powerful for getting the most of the lymph system to now start to circulate and work.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, and I'd love to hear someone's opinion about why it's designed like this, but the left thoracic duct, we have ducts on each side, is associated with the lymph areas of the body. I think like it might be 70% of them or more. So if you have an ache or a pain, essentially anywhere on your body that feels more inflammatory in nature,
Mm-hmm.
low back issues, hip issues are often very inflammatory, neck pain, face pain, ear pain, those types of things are very inflammatory. It doesn't really matter the type of issue, but those are examples. If you have those issues anywhere on the right side of your body, but also your left limb, then you would put the weight on your left clavicle area.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any of those issues on the right side of your face and neck and shoulder and right arm, part of the right side of the trunk too, you would put the weight on the right side. So why is it broken up like that? Don't know. But it's really great to know that.
Yeah.
Because just putting the weight there and doing some movement and some breathing can be amazing for helping with inflammatory based pain. So this is going back to some of your questions about acute injury.
Yeah.
This is also a phenomenal tool. So I said I like to work away from acute pain a lot of times at first. This would be an example of something that I would choose to do.
Yeah. Because you're helping with it's basically an anti-inflammatory maneuver, right?
Yeah. And you're getting, so stagnation of the lymph system just means you're not processing and moving fluids efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes like our lymph node regions get a little bit overloaded. And yeah, we don't want that, right? Fluid dynamics and moving fluids through the body really helps. When you have an acute injury, of course, you're getting swelling. Swelling is not a negative thing. It just means your body's doing what it's supposed to. But we do want to encourage, better fluid dynamics throughout those states when we're dealing with swelling. Movement's a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The lymph stuff is wild during acute injury. You could have a big puffed up left ankle from spraining it. Throw your feet up on a bench, put the kettlebell on the left clavicle area, do some breathing, and maybe some really minor movement somewhere on the left side of your body where it's not causing you any pain.
Mm-hmm.
You will physically watch the swelling go down. If you do this for 5 minutes, you take a picture of your ankle before you start, take a picture of your ankle when you're done. You might actually have an experience where your purple ankle is no longer the size of a softball. It's got better coloration and it's back down to, a more ideal size. And you can see that happen that quickly.
So is the swelling a negative thing that you want to get rid of?
It's not negative. So it's got a negative reputation.
Mm-hmm.
You remember we grew up with rice. When you have an injury, you do rice. And actually, it's kind of funny now. I think the person that invented rice has taken it back and said I was wrong. I forget the guy's name, but now what
it
we
was
know
beans
about,
all along.
Yeah. Now what we have learned is that when you're having an inflammatory response from an acute injury, swelling is natural.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we don't necessarily want it. It can get more uncomfortable because of the pressure that then starts to build up in maybe a joint area or something, and that might increase more nociception.
Mm-hmm.
So dealing with the fluids in that scenario is useful, but you don't have to have the mentality of, I need all of this swelling to go away. I remember when I was in high school, when we would hurt our ankles or something, sprain our ankles, our athletic trainer would have us dunk our ankle in, an ice bath that was so cold that it hurt. And now people are saying, well, that might not be necessary anymore. So I think we can turn to some of our other tools and just kind of lean on movement and get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
Rather than always thinking, the rest, right? The R for rest.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't want to just rest. There's always something you can do, even if it's not targeted towards the body part that is actually, causing you pain.
And remember that those global effects of circulation to
Exactly.
activation. Yeah.
Exactly. So global, right? Think we talk about blood flow restriction and lymphatics. Those two things right there, phenomenal.
If I had to hazard a guess why that left clavicle duct is the one doing the heavy lifting, I would say maybe it's because it's close to the heart
Oh,
and the cardiovascular system might be related to the
ooh,
lymphatic
that's a good
system,
guess. That's a good guess.
but I don't actually know
Yeah,
if that's true or how that connects.
that's a good guess. I'm going to remember that.
All right. I think I'd be remiss to not mention headaches of all shapes and forms, from
Mm-hmm.
migraines to just plain old headaches. I don't actually really know the difference other than in severity,
Yeah,
but I'm curious if you have any insights on that in this episode on pain.
man, headaches are tough because headaches are it's the type of pain associated with a headache. It's very well. It's like the threat bucket, right? It's something that can be a symptom
Mm-hmm.
of other forms of stress. So it's really tough, right? And that's why you talk to people who have figured out strategies to help themselves maybe resolve getting migraines or something. Everybody seems to have a different solution, right? You know, I did this, I did that. It's hard to pinpoint it. I think that's just because the type of pain it often is an output based on the threat bucket. So I can tell you just neurologically, if someone is experiencing a lot of pain, I would probably look, if we're talking structures, I would probably look to trigeminal nerve as one of the big players of that. We have a whole episode on trigeminal nerve,
That's
actually.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So lots of stuff we can do with trigeminal nerve. I mean, there's a lot of testing we'd have to do functionally. It's a sensory and a motor nerve. So we want to learn about the muscles, in this case of the muscles associated with chewing. We want to test your ability to sense different types of sensations with the face. There's also a sensory distribution for trigeminal nerve on the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. So there's a lot there to consider. So we would want to check that first, and possibly trigeminal work could help somebody that was experiencing migraines or headaches. I've seen a lot of stuff help people, and it's all very different. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen just cleaning up your diet and restoring better eating habits and managing blood sugar better, helping to very targeted work of trigeminal nerve, where you're doing cranial mobility work and trigeminal nerve glides and sensory work on the face. So that's tricky.
Does massaging the temples have anything to do? Like, is it related to some of this cranial mobility, or is that
Well, so
not?
the temporalis muscle up there is supplied by trigeminal nerve,
Okay.
and so a lot of times people will find relief, massaging those areas, whether it's your masseter muscle, like the big one we use for chewing. We also use that temporalis muscle up by your temple. As you clench your teeth, you'll feel that thing fire.
If you put
So
your finger on it, you can feel
yeah,
it. Yeah.
so a lot of times when we get that type of a pain, like a headache, you will feel like those muscles are crushing your head basically. So doing some manual work on those muscles can be soothing and sometimes help. Cranial mobility as a drill is kind of different. We're actually targeting connective tissues of the skull.
Okay.
So the trigeminal nerve has innervation to what is called the meninges of the skull, which is it's a protective layer of connective tissue that protects the brain and spinal cord. And trigeminal nerve has innervation, sensory innervation to that area anteriorly. The vagus nerve has it posteriorly. So we have cranial mobility drills that are actually designed to put mechanical tension on those tissues. And that's why it can be quite a useful trigeminal stimulus and sometimes help people with headaches too.
Yeah. And what about like vision related headaches? I know a lot of people get eye strain from the computer
Yeah,
or just staring at their phone too long.
that's a big one. I hear a lot about those. If you get headaches that are visually, from visual fatigue, you really need to work on your visual system. I mean,
Mm.
you got to improve the stamina of your visual system, and you might have eye muscles that need training. right? You can have eye muscle imbalances that can lead to easier fatigue with your visual system that then could cause a headache. So you got to think vision training for sure, and that's just all about finding an entry point that doesn't cause you any negative symptoms. But yeah, starting with all the basics: pencil push-ups, smooth pursuits, gaze stabilization. Most of those things right there can be found right on my YouTube channel too.
Yep. We kind of glossed over this when you were talking about joint pain and like nerve pain, but we did talk a lot about, I always forget the correct terminology, but basically your nerve glides and the tensioning and detensioning of these nerves. What are we calling that?
So our name is neuromechanics.
Neuromechanics.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the category. And then within that, you can tension nerves, you can slide nerves, you can slack nerves.
And then you also have joint mobility exercises within that. So we have a whole episode on that as well. And I think that
we do. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yep. Rather than going over all of that now, I think if you're interested in that, that's huge and a lot of bang for buck. So another great episode. And I'm sure there's also YouTube videos demonstrating a lot of those techniques as well.
Nice.
Any other final thoughts about, the construct in your brain that we call pain?
Just a reminder to understand that pain is a construct of the brain. It does not necessarily mean that, if you're experiencing pain, it doesn't necessarily mean you're injured. And it's really important to know that because most of the pain that we deal with on the day-to-day is non-injury event pain. So I think that, this episode and what we talked about with the threat bucket and how all of this is based on our perceived levels of threat, in knowing that, it really helps you reframe things. It helps you identify possible culprits in your life that are filling up your threat bucket that might be contributing to a chronic pain issue that you have and you never considered that before. So sometimes we have to get less focused on chasing our pain and focusing on a specific body part. We have to get more focused at understanding what might be going on holistically. The threat bucket is a wonderful tool for doing that. And just knowing this pain education on how pain works, where it comes from, I think personally as a coach, I have seen a lot of my clients have success because they started knowing that. Nobody ever told them that before. When they went to the doctors and got checked for, what might be going on, it was, let's take a look at your MRI. Nobody ever told them what pain is and where it comes from. The assumption is always made by the person that it must mean damage. And that's really toxic in your process for, resolving pain over time. So it's super important to know this, and it helps you keep a good mindset and have hope. And, once you combine the threat bucket with our assess, reassess process, my goodness, all of a sudden you're freed, right? And you can start to try things and see that your body will change immediately. Your pain experience will change immediately for better or worse. And then you can be a detective and an authority on your own body and start to navigate that. And hopefully over time and with practice of, the right drills at the right dose, you can resolve your pain issue.
Awesome.
All right, there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode on pain. I feel like this is something we could probably come back to several times. There's so much here, but I hope that the idea of the threat bucket really set in with you, and hopefully you can start using that to reframe your current situation with the pain that you might be experiencing. If you haven't done so already, we would be very grateful if you could give us a review on the podcast. It goes a long way for us. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll be back soon. Peace out.